That's gonna like kill you one day. Like
Yeah.
that will kill you.
For sure. I mean, just looking back, and again, I'm not a millionaire or billionaire, so maybe I'm doing it wrong. Who knows? If you can run a 6-minute mile, some people are gonna look at you and be like, dude, why are you sandbagging it? When you were young and your parents told you not to like hit your head on stuff, they're like, yeah, your brains don't, your brain cells won't grow back.
Okay.
Like, don't. Honestly, a smaller percentage of the like difficulties that veteran, the war not being over, like you said, like it's kind of simple. Even like combat is like, it's this conveyor belt of like lather, rinse, repeat. You're there with a small group. Life is fairly simple.
Episode 90, Stay Classy Podcast. Here we go. We got Jordan here. Jordan is the owner of WindanSea Coffee. He's also a Navy veteran, and he does a number of other things as well that we're going to get into. But I really wanted just to start off by this is something I noticed about when I was looking at WindanSea Coffee recently on the website. Well, actually, I don't think it was on the website, but it was in some of the information you sent me when we originally got introduced, which was you mentioned how you utilize plant medicine and surf therapy. Like you've used it for yourself, right? Since your experiences in the military, and you actually, we'll get into this later, but you use this in your philanthropy towards other veterans, towards helping them transition and heal back into society. So I want to start there with like, what got you into plant medicine and surf therapy? Because those sort of sound like really alternative approaches to, traditional, going up and signing with a counselor and, kind of going through those kinds of methods, which there's nothing wrong with that. But you kind of have these alternative approaches that are very sort of natural-ish and have this different feel. So what got you into that? Like, what was the starting point for that? What difference has that made for you?
Yeah. So, thanks, Steve. So backing up a little bit, like you mentioned in my background, I'm a Navy vet. I am actually trained as a medic. I was a medic with Marine Special Operations. And so my background really is in sort of this Western medical approach, and that was both my clinical training, but also after I had gotten injured in the military, I went down a fairly like Western medical route. It was a lot of injections, pills, surgeries, these type of, you're really treating the symptoms. And if you have byproducts of those symptoms, well, there's a pill for that too.
Yeah.
So at first my approach was just like, I don't really care what my, approach is, like surgeries, injections, like I'm just trying to get better, like I got to get back into the action. I got to get back to my job. I got to get, so I'm like just looking for the fastest way possible. After, 4 months go by and I'm not getting much better, despite all these other modalities that I'm doing, it's starting to occur to me that like, ooh, there might not be a better, it may be some version of like managing these symptoms. And if that's the case, then, how do I manage them for the long term? How do I do this sustainably in a way that's not going to mess up my organs? It's not going to, I'm playing whack-a-mole with side effects. And, I've now seen kind of what the VA system can look like. And, it's a lot of like salty old Vietnam, Korea vets. And they're on that, they don't know about a lot of these alternatives.
Yeah.
So, they're at the VA, they're fighting with the pharmacist to get their pills. And I'm like, dude, I don't want to be that. Like, I really, really don't.
That's no fun.
No. And so you're like, if I'm going to have to figure out how to like manage this, let's do so sustainably. And that's what kind of got me looking into alternative wellness, plant medicine, and then I can go into some surf therapy stuff too, but I'll let you hop in.
I just wanted to start there because like, I kind of like get into the hard hitting stuff right away, which is like, you come in and you have obviously the business background, but we can't ignore that there's a complete other side of you in this big part of your story, which is the military side, your time in the Navy. What was the timeline when were you a member of the Navy?
2013 to 2017.
2013. Okay, 2017. Yeah. And so I bring all that up because I feel like I'll share this, is that I have friends who I'm not going to name, but friends who are transitioning back from the military to civilian life right now. and it's been really hard on them for a lot of reasons. And I have family members. Both my grandfathers fought in World War II, so I have a family history of the military too. And I just know from hearing these stories that transition is so hard. It's so difficult. From the news, when I worked as a news reporter interviewing stories about like homeless veterans and those sort of things, like I know that these transitions are incredibly difficult. I don't know from personal experience, but from observation and research. So I wanted to start out by getting straight into like this other side of you, which is the philanthropy side, which is that you help these veterans transition back into civilian life, but you do it in these very different ways. And so I'm not trying to make you sort of like justify yourself here, but just sort of like to explain like what got you into those alternate approaches. So yeah, like with the surf therapy stuff, it's interesting because one of my best friends, he constantly tells me about how surf therapy has made a difference for him. He was an Army veteran. He saw combat in Iraq, and he talks about like specifically just like the sort of the healing process and how first he didn't really know how to surf and wasn't really sure it was for him, and then now he just is addicted to it. He can't stop surfing even if he wanted to, it feels like. So talk about surf therapy and what that actually does on the mental healing side of things.
Yeah. So one thing that you said that's important to kind of talk about is that transition. So in my case, I had gotten injured just kind of in training. It wasn't like a combat injury or anything, but it was a lot was kind of being thrown into question. It was like the future of your job, your career. You put a lot of identity into your job title, like that's who you are this, and so now if you're losing your job, like you're kind of losing a piece of yourself. And in my case, there was all these other, I'm losing my mobility, I'm losing respect in my community, I'm losing a lot of these other things, but even if you're not being medically separated from the military and you're just transitioning, you're coming from a culture where in 2 seconds, you glance over at someone's chest and you know their rank, kind of their story. It's written in their ribbons. You know what theaters they've been in, and so. But then you get to the civilian world, and you're just Steve. I'm just Jordan. Yeah. Like I don't know what you do. I don't know your history. I don't know your background, and so. That sort of sense of self that you gets built around, the culture, the rank, the discipline, the shared, trauma bonding that you guys all have kind of within the military. That's tough for everybody as they transition out. And they have to kind of redefine who they are and what they care about and, what they want to do in this next chapter. So I think that's, a challenge that a lot of people have, kind of regardless situation, PTSD, injured, not injured, like regardless, everyone's dealing with that. And I think where surf therapy kind of came in for me and where, it sounds like for your buddy and for a lot of people is it ticks a lot of boxes. One, you're getting in touch with nature, you're getting actually out there, which has its own like actual therapeutic effects, like physiologically, but you're also being part of a community. You're doing something, like in the military, you're coming from a shared experience, a shared lingo, a shared, sense of suffering in some cases, and surfing's kind of that way too. It's like, dude, like, you've been out on a big day and everyone's just getting thrashed and you're like, well, and there's its own terminology, like it's a culture around that. And I think that was what attracted me largely to it. And I think where it gets people a lot of benefit is that they realize like, out there, you're kind of in this flow state where all of like the problems that you have back on shore of like, who am I? What's my identity? What am I going to do? And, oh my God, the bills are here. And
that kind of recedes for a minute.
Yeah. For a second, you're just like all that, like, I can't surf if you're not paying attention to like, oh, I think this, is this a right? Yeah, I think it's right. Oh, let me paddle out over here. It's like this very like you're focusing on this very like in the now, mindful activity. And I think that sort of just like moments of where you're not thinking is where you're kind of free from suffering. And that's what I think people experience when they surf and why it's been so beneficial.
Enjoying this episode? Subscribe for more content on finding your own path to success. Every subscriber makes a huge difference to the pod, and we're grateful for everyone. And don't forget to throw us a classy like and comment too to let YouTube know that you're a fan of our stuff. Now back to your regularly scheduled podcasting.
Yeah, and I want to say like, and by the way, I'll admit I haven't done like looked at like scientific research or studies on things like surf therapy, on plant medicine therapies that you're talking about. So I'm just gonna have that disclaimer. Like I'm not an expert here, but I will say from anecdotal experience from the people I know who have served that both the things you mentioned about have been extremely helpful for those people. But I want to save the plant medicine and sort of the scientific like element, because I think there's like chemical and psychological issues too that we need to like talk about. But I kind of want to categorize that later down the line, because I wanted to get into something that's going to be a very I think emotional topic for everyone in the room, which is that, you know, today is September 12th. Yesterday was September 11th, the 23rd anniversary of the attacks on the Twin Towers. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that we have another veteran sitting in the room, which is our producer, Rob Esposito, who also served in the Navy. How many deployments, Rob, on your ship? Or
So I deployed for both Afghanistan and Iraq. So I was on the first carrier that got deployed after 9/11.
Yeah.
I was stationed in Virginia when 9/11 happened. Within a month, I came out to San Diego cross country, and then 2 days later they flew me out to the John C. Stennis. We went over and bombed Afghanistan for like 9.5 months. Yeah, it was a real Groundhog Day kind of situation.
Yeah. So Jordan,
Yeah.
and I'm not gonna be rude and ask your age, but I will say like you weren't in the military at that time,
No.
but when 9/11 comes around every year, like when that date comes around, just what do you feel, given now that you've served, especially, like what do you feel, like what comes to mind on days like that? And when I say days like that, I mean other days that have a lot of significance to members in the armed forces in particular, like Veterans Day, like Memorial Day.
For sure.
So what are the emotions that you feel? Like what sort of comes to mind for you personally? Let's start there.
Yeah. So talking about like 9/11, for example, I think one thing that's been interesting for me is that the significance and sort of the emotional, like what I feel about 9/11 or on 9/11 has evolved over the years, you know? So yeah, like you mentioned, I was, I think 11 when 9/11 happened. So I was like 6th grade, 7th grade. And everyone kind of remembers where you were. I was like just showed up to school, and they had the TV on and they were talking about this, and I remember just being like so like confused and kind of scared, but mostly just like angry, or like why would somebody do this, like you know what I mean? And like I was like I didn't really quite know it at the time. Like it's not like I was like I knew I was going to join the military, like I didn't, but I remember thinking like I wish I could have done something about that. You know what I mean? Like I took it very like personally, you know? And then as the, maybe by the time that you're in, there's sort of a sense of like, now I'm in that fight. Like I signed up, I showed up, I'm doing my part. And then as the years kind of go by and you kind of realize you're like, dude, we're 20 years into this thing, and the goalposts have kind of shifted, and we, what are we doing? Why are we still sending guys over there? Like how many generations of people are we going to send to go die on some dirt lot that we don't really have like any. We had a reason to go, and now it's sort of like it's kind of gone. And then I think as I get older too, and like you start learning a little bit more about like Saudi Arabia's connection to the financiers of the hijackers and where people were trained.
14 of the 19 Saudi.
Right, there's all this stuff, and you're like, dude, like even the story that we were told isn't really the story of what happened. And so
how does that make you feel? Because like on the one hand, there's got to be all this like rightful like pride and loyalty to the military and towards your brothers and sisters in arms. On the other hand, that's got to be hard to look at that other set of facts. Like how do you like reconcile that? Yeah,
sure. I guess where the way I think about it is that the people who go to fight the wars and the people who start the wars will never be the same people. There's always going to be different, because it's typically like the underclass, like the poor, like these are the people that go fight and die, and it's the the upper class that kind of they have stocks in military contracting firms, or they're they are on the other side of the equation. They can, they're senators. They can, push the chips around the board, and it's not their kids that are going to go die.
No skin in the game.
Yeah, they don't have the skin in the game.
What's the CCR song where it's what's the Fortunate Son?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, exactly.
What's the line about
ain't no senator's son?
Yeah.
I'm no senator's son.
Yeah.
I just want to say, Jordan, that I had a similar experience, except that I was in when it happened.
Yeah.
And it did evolve over time, because at first it was sadness and disbelief. But then there was this real we want revenge, right?
Like,
and
really
we were so excited to see all this gun camera footage of these guys getting blown up out in Afghanistan. It was, at the time, it was so exciting. But now, years later, knowing the true story and all the stuff that happened, it feels kind of dirty to be part of that. You know, to realize that we were kind of used.
Right.
You know,
right? Totally.
Yeah. So I wanted to say, and there's kind of a more kind of on the mental health front and the personal side of things when it comes to war that I want to get into. But I will say on the kind of the broader macro foreign policy spectrum, I'm not gonna give all my opinions here, but I will say this, that I was thinking yesterday to myself, is 9/11, has it really been about honoring the veterans, honoring the fallen of that day, and the people who fell in the wars to come? Or is it sort of become this dark symbol of our collective societal desire for vengeance and bloodlust?
Interesting.
And I was kind of thinking about that. I thought about posting to my social media followers. Not that anybody really gives a fuck what I have to say on those accounts, anyways. But just I was thinking it's hard because obviously I didn't lose anyone 9/11. I haven't lost anyone directly in the wars that followed. So people are who are you to say but I was just thinking and reflecting on just how long we stayed afterwards, because I did have a friend. He wasn't in Afghanistan, but he was in Iraq. He saw combat. He lost friends. He suffered injuries himself. And I was thinking man, what was it all for? How does he feel about that? Sometimes I even hesitate to ask him because it's a sensitive topic. So it's man, that's got to be hard on a lot of these people who feel like their sacrifice was, I don't want to say wasted, but it just feels like maybe it kind of went into the ether.
Sure. I guess there's different apertures that you can look at conflict or something like that.
Yeah.
So, there is the big picture strategic, okay, what did my impact do? Did we clear that city? Did we, stop? We cleared Mosul. We did, whatever the case is. And did that matter? And then I think where most people kind of are, especially if you've been on the ground and it's if you want to look at strategic and big picture, you're I'm here, and that means my brother doesn't have to be here.
Yeah.
My sister, my mom, my father,
Yeah.
I'm kind of holding this line so that they can go live society. I really do support if you want to be on a college campus and you want to wipe your ass with the flag, I support that, because we're one of the only countries in the world where you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
That is part of our identity. Go do that in Iran, see how that works out for you. Go do that in Gaza, see how that works out for you. So I support
go try
that.
To protest for LGBTQ rights in Gaza, see how that goes.
I support that. So it's part of the picture is I'm glad that you're not there. The other side of it is I'm here. I'm doing my best so that you can go home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't give a shit what the big picture, strategic picture, if it matters or not. What matters is that I did my best so that you could go home, or I can make your day a little bit easier. It's kind of, you take on that second family, mindset where it's everyone kind of has a role, and then you start doing these stupid menial tasks, but you're doing them for the people that you're around. So I think in that sense, that kind of gives people that have been there a justification that you've done your best.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because a number of people I've talked to, and in books I've read that were written by people who served in the armed forces, all the way from Hemingway up until the modern day, I just continually get this sense from World War I until the present day that and Rob's probably gonna be sick of me hearing this particular spiel because he's heard it before, especially in our last podcast about World War I. But my personal opinion about that war, not World War II, but World War I, also known as the Great War, is that I think in the last few years of that war, a lot of those 17, 19-year-old dudes didn't even really know what the fuck was going on. They didn't really know what the war was about. The aristocracy was shipping them off to fight each other in the trenches, and they're dying in the mud in Western Europe, and that was that. But like, I don't think a lot of people knew what the war was about. I feel like the consistent story I've heard though from books from Hemingway onwards and from stories from other veterans is that at some point you kind of like don't really think too much about that macro stuff, and it becomes more about the brother on my left, the brother on my right. Like it becomes about like, I don't really know exactly what this is all about, but I know that this matters to me in this moment.
Yeah.
And like that's what like kind of motivates you to get up in the morning. That's what kind of motivates you to fight.
For sure. I mean, there's even, I think it might be All Quiet on the Western Front. It's some
Great
World
book.
War One.
Yeah.
But it's a famous story about how it was on Christmas, and the
The
French and the
Christmas,
Germans,
they come across and they play soccer together. And
it's because they're like, that's why you have to try so hard to dehumanize the enemy, because it's real easy to see the humanity in the other side. And once you do, you realize you're like, oh, dude.
It's like, can I really kill this person?
Yeah, or like you see the absurdity in the whole thing. Yeah. You're just like, we're just in some ditch over here. You guys are in a ditch over there. Some people thousands of miles away are gonna make us go run at each other and create a bloodbath. But like for 5 minutes, like we just like acknowledge this shared piece of humanity that is Christmas and soccer and whatever, and it's easier to do. That's why there's so much effort goes into propaganda.
Yeah.
Hey there, classy viewers. Thanks for listening to our podcast. We're dedicated to providing you with quality content that inspires and brightens your day. But keeping it classy can be expensive. If you enjoy our content, we're asking for your support for the podcast using the donation link in the description below. Donations mean the world to us, and even as little as $5 can make a huge difference in helping us make this podcast a reality. Plus, donors are added to our shortlist to be the first to receive exclusive offers on merch, extra content, and even chances to appear on the pod. Anything you can give would truly be appreciated. Now get back to enjoying the rest of the podcast, and as always, stay classy.
And just to bring this back to 9/11, like, because my original question was like, what do you feel comes to mind? I will say this, although like I've never served and like have no, not even like in my direct like siblings or anything, like no one served, but my dad's father who passed away a long time ago, well before any of us were born, from lung cancer I think in the early 80s, but he served in World War II. He was an officer. He was a Marine Corps officer. And he fought in the Pacific Theater, so he fought on Guadalcanal, he fought at the Pacific Isles, lost all hearing in his left ear permanently from a grenade. I heard a bunch of other crazy stories, like about how he ran into a burning ammunition factory and saved a bunch of people.
Different breed.
Had a Jeep blown up in front of him with like 30 people, like all this stuff. But and honestly, some of the stories are really thrilling. Like it's all recorded in these letters that he wrote to my grandmother, who was his fiance at the time. While he was at war, and some of the stories are really thrilling. Some of them are honestly so heartbreaking that I can't even get into it. But what I will say is that obviously not to do with 9/11 specifically, because he passed away a long time before 9/11. But when days like that come to mind, I think I think about the grandfather I never met. I think like how would he have felt about on days like this? And he never talked apparently about the war, never spoke of it. It was only all this stuff was discovered after he had passed away about these letters and stuff. But I was just thinking like when what I feel is that about like kind of from that perspective of kind of the idea of like the only people who see the end of war are the dead, like you've heard that quote. I used to think that meant like there's like human history is just like a continuous cycle of war, which may be the case. Like I think that is the case actually, but I think that maybe what that refers to on a personal level, and this is going to tie back into what we were talking about earlier with the personal healing and stuff, is the war isn't really over when you leave the battlefield, is it?
Sure.
Like it's not over. Like I don't think it was over for him, and I have a lot of respect for him, so I'm not going to get into it. But I know there was a lot of personal struggles that happened, after the war.
Right.
A lot of personal pain, probably far more than I'll ever know.
For sure.
And I think like, there's a movie that didn't get a lot of a good reception when it was released. I think it's called Murphy's War. Anybody heard of it? It was released in the early 70s. I think the actor was Peter O'Toole. But the only thing I really remember from that movie, I saw it once a long time ago. I don't think it was even the best movie, but there was a line near the end. The storyline is basically this guy's hunting down the Germans that sunk his ship and killed all of his men. Or killed all of his like comrades, and he's hunting down this German submarine, and then they get the signal that the war is over. The Germans have surrendered, but he's like at the gunner's turret, and like everyone's like, dude, like you got to chill, like the war's over, man, like you can't like. he's like, it's not over for me. He just keeps saying, it's not over for me. Like, my war isn't over.
Right.
And I just like, I was thinking about that the other day, and like the PTSD and the trauma that I see in a lot of veterans that, you know, you can actually see in a lot of unfortunately, the veterans that are homeless and suffering. And the stories I've heard from friends about, you know, how that impacts relationships, how that impacts marriages, you know, father, son, like father, daughter, whatever. But like, I was just thinking with all of that, like the war isn't really over when people leave the battlefield.
Sure.
Like,
sure.
So that's kind of, for me, I guess, what comes to mind personally. I mean, do you guys kind of share that sentiment as people that have served, or like on days like that, does that kind of come up for you, or?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. And look, I was in the Navy. I was on an aircraft carrier, and it still took me a couple of years to get my head straight after, you know, being involved in all that stuff. And I was never even like in combat getting shot at.
Sure.
You know, and you have all the moral questions. Like I said, you start with this anger, and then after a while, you start to question yourself, and you know, and war kind of can make you a terrible person, and can make you kind of see red and want blood, and it's, you know, it's kind of a terrible thing, and it's really, really hard to come back from that. And there's a lot better programs and stuff, I think, for veterans now than when I got out 20 years ago. But I don't think the impact of that has changed. I think it's still just as bad. Veterans still struggle when they get out. You know, part of that is just because you're like we were saying, you know, it's an institutionalized kind of place where you just have to worry about what your job is today for the most part, making sure you remember to shave this morning, your uniform's on right, you show up. And when you get out, you know, not only do you have all this baggage from, you know, being involved with something that killed a lot of people, you know, but all of a sudden the world changes on you. It's a tough transition for anybody.
Yeah, and that's what I would distinguish that there. You know, obviously, like the form of PTSD that gets a lot of attention is like, okay, I went overseas, I did, you know, stuff that is, you know, let's call it morally gray, or just is inhumane, right? Non-human, and now I'm wrestling with that trauma that, you know, that's one type. And I think that is honestly a smaller percentage of the like difficulties that veteran, you know, the war not being over. So there's that aspect. There's, you know, the like you said, like it's kind of simple. Even like combat is like, you know, it's this conveyor belt of like, you know, lather, rinse, repeat. You know, you're there with a small group. Life is fairly simple. Any deployment, whether combat or not, it's just like you get in these routines. You know, it's kind of sometimes what you're doing is meaningless, sometimes it's meaningful, whatever. But it's simple, right? Yeah. And then you get back here, and it's just like everything is dynamic. There's no right or wrong answers. You know, so that's a trauma. And then the third trauma that I think, you know, is that a lot of people deal with, and this kind of gets brought out with some of the like plant medicine, like ayahuasca, like psilocybin type of retreats that people do, is so sometimes the trauma began before the military, and you brought that into the military, you know, and maybe that was your reasoning why you know, I didn't want to be bullied, and I was always bullied, and, you know, my dad was an asshole, and and so I needed to go make a man for myself, and I joined the Marine Corps, and I did that, and so it's like the trauma. Yeah, you went to Fallujah and you did all sorts of crazy shit, but that the trauma started from your childhood, you know, and so I think when you factor in all of that together, and then, you know, your wife that you know is pregnant now with somebody else's baby that had on you factor in all that stuff too, and that's where the war, I think, is not over for people. But the PTSD part, I think, it's a smaller fraction than but it gets a disproportionate amount of the attention.
Only one in, I think, like every 10 people in the military is actually a trigger puller, right? Like most people are techs, they're in the rear with the gear, they're working with artillery or in aviation, a medic, whatever. You're not out there killing people, but you're still a huge part of it.
Yeah. So I want to get into the therapy part then. So I mean, this is a really complex issue, and it's something that I again, and I'm going to say it just one more time, but I'm not an expert in yet. Like, you know, I hope to be someday, but there's so many variables at play here. There's real psychological and chemical challenges, like in the human brain, that contribute to things like PTSD, that
100%.
contribute to mental illness. Like
100%.
those are real. I'm not going to come on here and say like, oh, well, like you know, like for me, you know, I've had a tumultuous history that I've shared before with mental health and with medication. Currently I'm not on medication, but I'm not going to come here and be like, oh, well, for me, this worked, so it's going to work for all of you. Like I don't take my meds anymore. So like, you know, just everybody get off. No, like
Right.
don't fucking listen to me.
Right,
Like
right,
if I say
right.
that, like,
For sure.
you know, kick me out of the studio. But
Get them some meds.
yeah, give me some meds. But like, it's complex because, and it's also a very emotionally charged topic because people are affected by this. So for you though, like what's worked, like as far as like on the sort of scientific side with like the alternative medicines that you've employed, and how does that have a multifaceted approach to the psychological, the chemical, the kind of the everyday life, like the emotional, like how do you tackle those different areas with your approach?
Totally. So yeah, there's kind of a lot I want to unpack about what you said. I guess maybe one of the first things we can talk about, like physiologically, what's happening with sometimes in the brain when you're having like, you know, some mental episodes or something like that, a mental situation. And then in the body, something more like physically based, you know, inflammation, pain, you know, sleep, these type of deals. But so going back to like mental, let's talk about like stress and anxiety and sort of like depression, addiction, these type of, you know, symptoms that are mental based.
Sure.
Well, one thing that has like kind of bridges that gap of both physiological and mental are traumatic brain injuries. And that's a very common thing that you find in the military because you experience these from blast trauma too. And like they're just now starting to like realize like, oh, there's a lot more, like whatever we thought was like a safe distance or a safe number of explosions or only explosions over this big, they're starting to look at that and realize like, oh, when we're, you know, peeling back the brain and we're seeing CTE kind of even, you know, from people throwing repeated hand grenades, you know, so now you're talking about breaching doors in hallways, you know, and you're getting blowback and it's like your brain is just getting, so you're getting, I mean, I don't know if you saw that movie with Will Smith. I forget what it's called, but he was like a
war movie.
No, it was a football movie actually.
Football movie.
It was when they first started. Like he was a famous football player. I'm embarrassed.
I think I know about the movie you're talking. Kind of the football and concussions.
Yeah, concussions. Yeah,
I know about the movie. I don't think I've seen it.
Right. So his whole deal was that he donated. He was like had this. He was a pro football player. Had this major, you know, personality change over time, and he was like, you know, I think he killed himself, but he was like he shot himself in the chest and was like, you know, studying my brain, and they started realizing all these concussions really resulted in changes in his brain that then corresponded to changes in his behavior.
Is it a Chargers player?
I don't remember what team he played for.
Chargers guy that committed suicide in the early 2000s.
Oh, was that Junior?
I was saying Junior
Seau? Yeah.
Maybe that's not who Will Smith was playing, but regardless. So they're you know, we know that about concussive force, you know, if you're using anti-tank stuff or like the Carl Gustav, like a lot of these other like big heavy weapons. But now they're starting to, you know, realize, oh, if we're throwing hand grenades at a range a lot, like that could do it. In that case, what about like belt-fed, you know, crew served weapons like 50 cals and stuff like that, in which case you're like, maybe we're driving everybody crazy to have like actual impacts on their brain that could then translate to behavior changes down the line. So what I have found to be super beneficial is plant medicine at managing some of these symptoms, because there's a pharmaceutical for everything as well. But in my experience, a lot of the pharmaceuticals came with side effects that then you'd have to use more pharmaceuticals to address, and before you know it, you're shoveling handfuls of pills, you know, every day, and you're like, this is just they're my reality. So looking at like functional mushrooms, for example, what they're finding they do is they enact on what's called your HPA axis, which is your hypopituitary adrenal axis, I believe. And what that does is it's the part of your thyroid actually that creates adrenaline and produces cortisol. So when you get into that fight or flight response of like, oh, I'm like stressed out, or
Yeah.
there's a tiger coming, whatever, and you spike on adrenaline and cortisol. Well, as we're going through like daily life, we're kind of in this like low grade,
Yeah.
adrenaline and cortisol. We're like, oh, my boss is calling. Oh, my bills are due. What I mean? There's no tiger around, but
Yeah.
these little like cortisol drips all day. And so what like reishi mushroom does is it enacts on that axis, and it down regulates your cortisol production and adrenaline production, and gets you back into like that balance, like homeostasis, where you don't feel stressed, you don't feel anxious. And if you're not feeling stressed and anxious, you're not producing inflammatory markers. And maybe that's why that knee won't heal. Every time I go to the gym, my knee's been kind of clicking. I wish it won't just get better. Well, if your body's in like a constant state of low grade stress, it's not going to get better, because it's just going to keep on sending inflammation to that joint. So by decreasing your cortisol production overall, you're decreasing your inflammatory response, which is
that's
helping.
interesting. So what I'm hearing is that like stress, it doesn't just like mean like a general feeling of discomfort on knees. It can actually contribute to like specific physical pains.
For sure, and
I didn't really know the
sickness
science
and
behind that,
sickness, because it's your immune system too.
Okay.
Your immune system is an inflammatory response. It's your body sending T cells and white blood cells and all sorts of different cells to attack a virus or something.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like, if you're not sleeping very well, like let's say you're chronically underslept, your immune system takes a hit. Why? Because all of these systems kind of work together to help each other out. So if you're not getting enough sleep, then you're not replenishing that like system, and so you're constantly kind of like undermanned, and then that's when your environment and all the bacteria and viruses that we're being exposed to, that's when that starts winning that battle. So all these things play together, and that's why like kind of stepping back, when I think about like entrepreneurship or business or just life in general, there's always this big trade-off right now, or it's like the hustle bro culture, rise and grind up at 2:30 doing burpees,
Alex Hormozzi's and all that.
Which, I mean,
by the way, I love that guy.
For sure.
But I know
a lot of guys
mean,
like that.
The rise and grind,
I like a lot of them.
Example.
But yeah, for sure. So there's that mindset, and for me, I guess on the flip side, like I'm kind of trying to approach holistically, in the food you eat, the medicine you do, the way you approach your life, it's holistic. And so the way I think about it is like, if your family life's falling apart because you're not taking little Tommy to soccer game, and your wife hasn't been on a date for 6 months, and and you're eating like crap, you just order Arby's every night, but hey, you're grinding, bro, you're 16 hours on the spreadsheets, how long can you do that? And how you maybe the first 3 months of your spreadsheets are crushing it, but then what happens a year later? Like now, your wife left you, or your partner left you, your kid, your life starts falling apart. Are you really bringing your whole self to work if the rest of your life's in shambles? If your health, now you're obese, and you have diabetes and all this other stuff because you let your health go. So for me, it's like you kind of have to. You can't just neglect certain aspects of your life. Like there are always going to be trade-offs. Can't do everything. But for me, I find that if I want to be the best entrepreneur, the best business owner, to make the most impact in my community, make the most impact in veterans and et cetera, it's like I have to kind of balance the rest of my life, bring my life back into homeostasis.
Sure. And before I move on to another question, I'm going to quickly say something about what you just said. Like with the whole like stress thing, I've always heard like, oh, stress is like a killer, to think of like mentally, which is true. But you're like saying like the science is there that stress can physically kill you in a sense. Like it can actually physically kill you if you don't take care of it. So for all these like hustle bros and entrepreneurs, and we've talked about them on the podcast before, the Musks and the Steve Jobs and those guys and the Bill Gates, like, oh yeah, like work 100 hours, blah blah. It's like, oh yeah, like have fun with that while everything else in your life falls apart. And like look at some of those guys, their kids sometimes fucking hate them, like their spouses fucking hate them, their employees say that they're horrible to work with. Like, whoa, but at least they're a billionaire. It's like, good fucking job, buddy. So the reason I bring that up is like, people talk about like, oh, like balance, yeah, but it's like, no, like this can be life or death. And it can be life or death for you. It could be life or death for your loved ones, like for those relationships. And stress is, can physically kill. Like, and one quick anecdote, and then I promise I'll move on. But like, I was randomly reading up about this battle the other day. It was a World War II battle. It was the deadliest battle of all time. The Battle of Stalingrad between the Germans and the Russians. And apparently, like something around, there were like around 2.5 million casualties. Like the worst, most casualty-ridden battle of all time. Arguably the turning point of World War II. But the reason I bring this up is because apparently I was reading that, like, you'd think, oh, the generals who aren't doing the fighting, like, they wouldn't be physically affected. But actually, the generals in Stalingrad, because of stress, were suffering so much physical pain. Like, apparently, one of the Russian generals, his hands had to be bandaged because he was riddled with eczema to the point where his, like, skin was, like, just almost, like, crawling. Like, and the German general, there was something wrong with him, I forget. And then the other Russian general that launched the counteroffensive that won the battle and saved the day, like I think General Zhukov, he was suffering some kind of physical ailment it was all stress induced.
Yeah.
And so the reason I bring this up is because like you can only put off like, oh, like I'll take care of that like mental like stuff like later, like all the holistic, be like, oh, that holistic hippie crap. Like it's like, no, like that's gonna like kill you one day. Like that will kill you.
For sure. I mean, just looking back, and again, I'm not a millionaire or billionaire, so maybe I'm doing it wrong. Who knows? But the way I think about it is that like if you can run a 6-minute mile, some people, but you're running a marathon. Some people are gonna look at you and be like, "Dude, why are you sandbagging it?
Yeah,
like you can run. I've seen you run a 6-minute mile. Why are you running an 8:30? Like why? And you're like, I get that. I can go faster, but in mile 7 and mile 10 and mile 14, I'm gonna burn out. I can't run that fast for that long. And it's kind of a similar approach. It's like it's not sandbagging. It's just sort of like looking to the long run and trying to do as best as you can and work as fast as you can, but sustainably for the long run. And just on the last point that you mentioned, something about eczema, kind of interestingly enough, eczema is like an autoimmune kind of response. Is like an autoimmune disorder. There's a lot of these. Lyme disease is also one of those. Multiple sclerosis. There's a whole host of them, and it seems like they're becoming more prevalent. Like I know multiple people.
Like they're making a comeback in like
in a bad way. Yeah. Like I know people my age that have come down with like multiple sclerosis or have been just recovered from Lyme or something like that, and often that comes from ticks. But point being, these autoimmune disorders, they're finding that mushrooms have actually been beneficial in helping those because of its ability.
So
to sort
I
of
want to talk about
tamp
that,
down.
and this will tie into your business. So the ingredients you use for your coffee, the adaptogens. And you've mentioned the mushrooms and we've touched on that and the CBD, but talk about that in detail. Like how do those ingredients and the kind of the science behind that play into what you do on the business side? Like talk about the science that like sort of behind that, and then like how you start incorporating that into business.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So I'll kind of briefly run you through some of the big ones, but so with CBD is interesting. It's a cannabinoid. It's found in cannabis, but it's non-psychoactive. So THC is the compound that makes you feel high. That's what's regulated. And CBD is all like 99% of the medicinal aspects of THC, but it's not psychoactive. What's interesting about cannabinoids in general is you have receptors in your brain and that correspond throughout your body, and they're literally like designed like a lock and key for cannabis molecules, like cannabinoids is what they're called. So taking them externally from the cannabis plant is one way of getting them. It's called exogenous cannabinoids, or you can produce them internally, which are endogenous cannabinoids, and things like the runner's high, getting into like that flow state. Your body naturally produces cannabinoids, which are like a feel good, kind of bringing your body again back into homeostasis. So that's cannabis or CBD. Looking at some of the mushrooms, I mentioned reishi, which is one that modulates your HPA access, but some of the other ones that are pretty interesting are lion's mane. It's a big white mushroom, looks like the head of a lion. That's why it's called that. And that mushroom has been studied and found to regenerate brain cells and nerve cells. So, when you were young and your parents told you not to like hit your head on stuff, they're like, yeah, your brains don't,
Sure.
your brain cells won't grow back.
Okay.
Like, don't, that has largely been kind of the accepted position of it up until fairly recently, where there is actually neurogenesis under certain conditions. And one of them is with the supplementation of lion's mane mushroom. So that's really good for like people kind of suffering with Alzheimer's, getting back like memory, cognitive support, just kind of creativity. It's like a really good like workers supplement. You want to go into the office, or you want to be creative, or podcasting is another like a really good one. Cordyceps, they call that the athlete's mushroom. It's really good at helping your body extract oxygen into your bloodstream, or like pull oxygen into your bloodstream, good in ATP production. So it's just sort of like good for energy, like really nice clean energy, and getting your body to like process oxygen and use it efficiently. Then there's, let's see, turkey tail, really good for your immune system. Chaga, same thing. Chaga, I think, is one of the most nutrient dense, if not the most nutrient dense supplement that we like know about. And so what you start doing is okay, lion's mane's good for your brain, cordyceps good for like your cardiovascular system.
So how you tie it all together.
Put it all together, and then you kind of create, and now you're like a head to toe. And while there are many mushroom products out there on the market that are will do all of these things, there's tinctures, there's gummies, there's the mushrooms themselves, there's for me, when I was kind of learning about all these things and starting to implement them into my diet, I was like, this is great, but I still had to like remember to do it. You know what I mean? You're not going to get better by not taking them. So I had to, and then if you start, okay, let's get a lion's mane supplement. Oh, let's get a cordyceps supplement. Let's get, you have a medicine cabinet now that's like 4 layers deep of all of this stuff, and you got to buy all of this stuff. And, again, you're not benefiting if you're not taking it. So my thought was that like, I don't need to remember to drink coffee in the morning. Like, it's like the first thing I think about when I wake up is like, it's already part of my ritual. And there's this concept called habit stacking, which is like, it's easier to start implementing new habits if you can stack them onto habits that you're already doing. And so if coffee is sort of like this habit and this ritual that I look forward to, that I'm already doing, and that is sort of, I've already made the space in the day for, what if I just made that moment that, when I got in all these other supplements. And so I kind of combined them into coffee, and
Did you subscribe yet? If you like our content, it's the easiest way to support the pod. Hit the subscribe button on the bottom right and keep it classy.
That. And I wanted to ask you, like, just to be clear, like, and you've kind of like established that connection between like, here are the ingredients, here's how it comes together, and here's how it ties into coffee. But someone listening to this might be like, oh, like, especially people that are wary of anything with the word like mushroom or marijuana, and it like might be thinking like, oh, what, are you encouraging people to go out and take drugs for their mental health issues? Like, but I don't think it's that's an oversimplification though, right? Because it's not like, oh, like go out and do shrooms and your problems will go away. It's more like, I feel like what I'm hearing from you is using the right strains and like the right concentrations combined with other ingredients and other therapies, this can help. So kind of like for people that like might get the wrong idea, like, and are thinking like, like this, because there's also another side to this, right? Which is that there is some research out there, which is controversial, that says that marijuana use, mushroom use, drug use can aggravate some underlying mental conditions. So, But what that's not what we're talking about with your products. What we're talking about is like specifically studied strains that mixed with other ingredients can be helpful, right? Like,
and just to make sure that your audience is clear, that there are, so THC and psilocybin are the cannabis and mushroom compound that are psychoactive and also federally not legal. Like CBD and these other functional mushrooms and adaptogens are legal and non-psychoactive. So I just want that to be clear. Like even shiitake mushrooms is technically a medicinal mushroom. So if you're thinking about like mushroom coffee in this context, think about it like it's no dissimilar to like a shiitake mushroom coffee. Besides that sounds kind of gross, but you know, like yum.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's one thing. And back to kind of what I was saying earlier about like holistic approach to everything. Like I don't believe in magic bullets that you know, like with this one product you will now you'll sleep better and you know, like all this stuff. Like I really do think that you know, holistic foods and superfoods like adaptogens and functional mushrooms are an ingredient in a holistic lifestyle. But there are just other aspects to it, you know. Going outside, you know, moving your body, connecting with other people, eating good foods, exploring, you know, for me, it was surf therapy, it was yoga. I tried things like sound baths, you know, it's just kind of like, you know, and then I also explored, you know, like ketamine therapy and psilocybin and some of the other things. So like, there's not a one size fits all recipe. I think it's an exploration. It's something that you kind of engage your entire life into figuring like what works for you and what is sustainable and what sits well with your body. But yeah, you know, functional mushrooms and adaptogens are just a component in a holistic lifestyle.
So that's great. Now with WindanSea Coffee, like in the drinks that you serve and the ingredients that you use. And by the way, how long have you guys been open again?
We've been
La Jolla location.
6 years. So we don't have a brick and mortar, but we're primarily an e-commerce store. We also sell through some like natural food grocers, and we're getting into coffee shops now, serving some of our adaptogen powder products.
So what I was going to ask you though is like I'm just curious, genuinely curious, like how. Like, you know, you've explained how your coffee has ingredients that other people aren't using. Why do you think other coffee businesses, like other businesses that provide coffee to other businesses as well and to people, like why are other people not doing what you're doing, or are they? Is this catching steam? Like, what's the kind of nature of that movement?
Yeah, sure. So I think the nature of the movement is that there's a large like mass scale awakening and education towards, you know, what these substances are, because 5 years ago, you know, if you told somebody that you had mushroom coffee, they'd be like, that sounds disgusting, or they would only associate it with like a psilocybin, like psychedelic, like coffee type of deal. Nowadays they're like, oh, like mud water, oh, like, you know, some other brand that they've, you know, seen advertised to them on Instagram, or, you know, that their sister's trying and has been using for a while and she swears by it and blah blah blah. So there is sort of like people, you know, largely are becoming aware of this. They're becoming aware of the benefits, and the sort of like the off the bat like ick factor of like, I don't know, that sounds crazy. Like that's kind of going down. I would say how we differentiate ourselves amongst some of the other like mushroom coffee or mushroom coffee alternative products out there is that we're really approaching it from a coffee first. Like some of these other brands, I guess I'll mention them, but like Four Sigmatic is an old one. It's been there for a while. Great company. Tim Ferriss talked about it in the 4 hour work week. So they use instant coffee. Mudwater doesn't use coffee. It's like a cacao, chai, whatever alternative. Rise, you know, they'll use either an instant or it's like some oat thing, or, you know, whatever. And they all have their, you know, approach to it. But for me, I was like, I like coffee. I don't want to drink fake coffee or instant coffee or half coffee. I want to drink coffee, and I want to drink good coffee. I just want my good coffee to also have these benefits, you know? And so that was kind of our differentiator. And then, you know, we use another slight difference is because we have whole bean coffee, which is, you know, keeps your coffee fresher. It really is kind of focusing on the flavor profile. You can change the grind size if you want to do French press or espresso or whatever the case is. But in order to do so, that means we use a triple extracted mushroom extract, which actually increases the bioavailability. So it lets your body absorb it a little bit better. And it also has like almost 10 times the amount of like beta glucans and polysaccharides, which are the compounds.
Sorry, I gotta stop you.
They're just the compounds that
stop you and ask you what the fuck that was. And you go ahead and explain.
Yeah. It's just like within. So it's like what you know within CBD coffee, right? The compound that makes you feel good is the CBD cannabinoids. Within the mushrooms, okay, reishi mushroom, that's a species of mushroom, but what in the mushroom is actually making you feel good? And there's different compounds: beta-glucans, polysaccharides, triterpenes, whatever. Not to get too deep into the weeds there, but those are the things. So just by having a like a whole bean coffee, maximizing flavor, freshness, and also bioavailability by using an extract that is like really easy for your body to, get the good things out of the extract and get into your body.
Now, how many? So you guys serve coffee? Sorry, is it throughout San Diego? Is it just in La Jolla kind of area right now, or
serving? We're just in.
Like, where's your coffee going?
Yeah,
like, what
so
locations?
we're served out of the Blue Whale in La Jolla.
Okay.
Valley Farm Markets in La Jolla and in Spring Valley, and then we're in 3 locations in Vegas. But I'm really trying to get into more
marketplaces.
Yeah. So what's funny is so for coffee is actually like a relatively difficult to get into coffee shops, even though it sounds kind of ironic. But it's because most coffee shops, they have an arrangement with some vendor that they're using, whatever. And now it's like you're gonna add a second coffee vendor to that.
Sure.
It just sort of complicates.
So I was gonna ask you about that. So like, how do you approach these businesses?
Yeah.
And like it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of got to sell them on your approach and your idea, right? Like, hey, like I have this alternative, like kind of coffee, like with these unique ingredients that have research behind them. How do you convince them to go with that and not just keep like importing coffee from like, fucking like Nigeria or something?
Yeah. Well, so it's,
and I didn't mean to be disrespectful by the way with that, but it's just like, it's actually true that a lot of these, coffee, especially for some of the bigger chains, originates, the beans are harvested in East Africa. But to my question was, which wasn't phrased very well, was just like basically how do you sort of sell people on like, hey, there's this like alternate approach, it's better for people, it's better for the environment? Like,
yeah. So it's there's different messaging when you're trying to communicate to customers, like on the internet, like my D2C, direct to consumer sort of channels and model. It is what you're saying. It's hey, this is better for you. Here's all the benefits. Here's all the science. Here's what we do. Here's why you're gonna love it. Here's all this stuff. Yeah. When you're approaching a coffee shop to have them to serve it, they don't really care. I mean, they might care a little bit, like in that if that's what their customers care about, but like they just care. Is it going to sell? Is it going to be profitable? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, is it worth my time? Because this is another thing now that I got to think about. I got to spend money on. I got to take 5 minutes of my day to listen to your spiel about why you think I should buy it from you. You know what I mean? So you really got to make your points to a business owner. You got to speak to their motivations. Why are they in business? And on some level it might be because like, hey, I just want to provide the best stuff out there for it. So it's a little bit different messaging because you really got to make business sense to the business owner, whereas you really just got to make health sense and financial sense to the end user. But back to that what I found with coffee shops is these our mushroom powders have been a lot easier to get in for service because, like I said, it's hard getting a coffee shop to offer a second coffee there. But if you're offering something that kind of is one step on the other side of the supply chain, right? So use whatever coffee you want. You could use your coffee. You have a great relationship with your vendors. That's awesome. But are you serving a mushroom mocha? Do you have a mushroom matcha? Do you have a mushroom chai latte mix? So you can do this, and we send you some pricing. It's you buy for this much. There's good margin on it. And you don't need new equipment. You don't need anything. All you need is a jar to put it in bulk. And then I'll train your staff. I'll do all this stuff. So it's I've found getting the powders into coffee shops for service has been easier because it's not as much of a logistical headache for like a business owner who really doesn't care that much right now. You gotta pull out all those friction points from it and make it just as seamless as possible. But it's a lot of work, it's definitely something I really went down primarily when I started the business is direct to consumers. What's my value prop? How do I communicate it to people? Social media, blah blah blah, all this stuff. And now, like 2024, and probably going into obviously 2025, my focus has really been D2C is expensive. Customer acquisition is really expensive. Just because you have a good product and a website and a good story is not enough to just like, the money just starts rolling in. You got to drive traffic to that website, and that's hard and it's expensive. So coming at it from the like, let's look at a business to business channel and strategy, and because it's relationship based, we can get volume sales. We take some of the money we're making from volume and we can reinvest that into our D2C strategy now. So that's kind of in the 24, 25, that's what we're
Well, I'm honestly glad to hear that like business owners that you're pitching this different kind of coffee to are receptive. It's good to hear that like this movement's catching steam, that it's, we don't live like in the early 2000s or before where this was just like, unacceptable, like, and now it's like becoming more mainstream. But my question is actually like, just as far as your future goes, like what are your expansion plans? Like, how do you see this thing like going? Like right now you're online. You kind of sort of mentioned the possibility of there being a brick and mortar, but like what's your overall like sort of expansion plan? Like what's your vision for WindanSea?
Yeah, so I would really love to continue to expand to like throughout coffee shops, because one thing that's been really cool, especially in Southern California, but you kind of see it happening in more places, is there are a number of these like cafes, coffee shops that are opening, and they're not like a Starbucks approach where it's like, let's just, let's have bad coffee and sweet sugary drinks and we'll just get you out the door. Like these are, they're really, I was just at Nectarine Grove. Actually, that was like in Encinitas. I don't know if you've been there, but it was my first time there.
Okay.
And super like healthy spot, they have, gluten-free, whatever, everything. But just like their emphasis is on, whole foods, like healthy meals, smoothies, using fun ingredients, like these sort of like superfood type stuff, cocoa nibs and bee pollen and stuff like that are like these foods that are also kind of like superfood supplement type, and they're normalizing and making demand for these things. So those types of locations are like the perfect fit for us, because we're like, that's exactly who they already get it. You're not having to convince them that this is a real thing, and they're like
those barriers there.
there's not all those barriers. They're like, hey, they're like functional mushrooms, and they're like, okay, no, I'm familiar, I get it. Now if it makes financial sense and it tastes good, we're in business. And they already know that their customer base are our demographic, like that's who we're looking to. So I think kind of continue to pursue that. And then, what I've loved about doing direct to consumer and just building a brand in general is honestly like doing this type of stuff. Like I love connecting with people, sharing my story, hearing other people's stories, and just sort of expanding. So I think, like every brand pretty much for the next 10 years, there's going to have to be an emphasis on like a digital component, like, media, content creation, anything. So, we started a podcast this year. It's called the Mind Body Mushroom. Just kind of, that intersection of holistic wellness and human stories and, just, I guess, whatever's kind of interesting. I've always thought it'd be really sweet to do these like kind of like vlog type of trips where, you fly down to like El Salvador and go like tour a coffee farm and like get some like really cool content of like the production, partner with other brands, like local like surf brands and stuff like that, get like co-branded sponsorship with their gear, and then you do like a surf trip down there, coffee farm, and it becomes like killer. Episode, whatever. Like, just really having like fun with how do we draw attention to all of these things that I'm interested in, and I know other people are as well, and so just kind of creating like an ecosystem around that.
I love that, man. Like the kind of the surf idea, like I know a number of people I'd be interested in that. I'll think on that one.
Yeah, dude.
Maybe there's some kind of collab.
If you can help me put something together. It's been an idea in my head for a while. But...
Yeah, no, I love that, man. But last question before I let you go is just this: like, we've touched on a lot of different stuff. We've been all over the place today, but sort of to tie it all together, man, like we talked a lot about like PTSD earlier, and we talked about like the the mental trauma that veterans face and the challenges of coming home and trying to live a quote unquote normal or civilian life.
Right.
For you personally, and this doesn't have to be like any big like moral lesson for everybody, but just for you personally, I want to know like with all the challenges of the transitions that you had to make personally, and then not only did like in overcoming those challenges, but in founding your own business and being successful with it, I genuinely curious, man, like what like kept you going like through all that time? Like I'm sure it wasn't easy. I know for a fact it wasn't easy based on what you've told me. Like what kept you going? Like what motivated you? What still motivates you?
Yeah. So I guess a couple things on a very like pragmatic level. Having worked in the military, I was like, I don't want to work for another like big company again, or have I like working in small teams, but just like being an employee of a bureaucratic organization, I was like, I am good on that. Like, no. So I have to then figure out what I'm going to do. Like, how am I going to put food on the table and continue going? And I have a tendency to like beat myself up a lot, like I'm very hard on myself. And that's been like one of my challenges. But what I've kind of over time, I'm always like, oh, why am I not, bigger? Or why haven't we done this? Or are you working hard enough? Like, oh, you're supposed to, this is a startup. You should be putting in 90-hour work weeks. Why aren't you doing that? Like, what, that type of deal. And what I've found is that like falling in love with the process and just sort of like enjoying like the struggle and not being so attached to the result, because once you get that result anyway, it's just going to be another milestone that you like. I'm the type of person that's not going to be satisfied with that result either. So then it's the next thing, and then it's the next thing, and then it never ends. So you're just miserable. That's your deal. It's like you got to realize like, this is what we're doing. This is it, man. Like I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to share this moment with you and talk about it. And I'm, it's 12 on a, what even day is it? Thursday. Yeah. I didn't have to call anyone to be here. I didn't have to ask permission. I'm like forging my own path, and the imposter syndrome that sort of is associated with that for like the first couple of years. And I'm on some level the whole time, but like I've started to feel less of an imposter and feel like, no, this is who I am. This is what I do. I'm in control. I got this, and I'm just enjoying the ride, man. Like that's all I can really do. So June of 2023, randomly, it's kind of like random story, but I got sepsis. It was like I had like a random infection that became a kidney infection that became sepsis, and I was in the hospital for like 4 days. They were like, "Good thing you came in." They're like, "You were probably like hours away from a septic shock, and we would have found you." And it was there's like a really high mortality rate at that point. It was like whoa, it's sort of like out of nowhere, dude. Like, but while I was in the hospital, which was honestly probably the most miserable thing I've ever done in my life, just being in the hospital for 4 days, I had thought back to like, what if I had just died? Like, what would have been the last thing that I had done? And the Saturday, Sunday prior to that, or like the 3 days leading up to that, I had just taken my girlfriend on a trip to like thank her for, she helped me like do some work on my house. And, so I was like, it was like a whole like gift to her. I was an absolute mess on that trip because I was dying of sepsis, but like the thought that counts, right? But there, so I was like doing something for my family. And then the Saturday, Sunday, right before that, I volunteered for a surf competition up at Camp Pendleton. It was like a military surf competition. We did a whole setup with like WindanSea. We're just giving out free coffee and stuff like that. So there may have been something right just before that, but like I remember thinking, I'm like, I did something nice for my family. I did something nice for my community. I did, I'm like, if I were to get hit by a car like on the way, out of here, I'd be cool. I'd be happy with that. I would regret nothing, dude. I'd be like, and so that became what it's important. Like, who gives a shit? 10 years from now, if you hit can you look backwards 5 days and be like, yeah, I did those good.
Yeah.
Those are a good 5 days. You
Yeah.
know, I'm proud of myself and who I am as a person because
Yeah.
of that.
And that's all it's about, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. I mean, that's
I
all you
mean,
can do. That's all you can do.
And I know I said that was the last question, but I'll just close with this thought. Like, it's cliche. It's like, tell your loved ones that you love them. But for me recently, honestly, and there's not time to get into it now, but just with some of the things I've shared before in this podcast, like, there's been times where those relationships haven't always been easy and it's been rocky. There's been resentment, there's been bitterness, there's been challenges. But I will say this, I've started recently for myself, and I'm not saying everybody has to do this, but started trying to like consciously like call someone I care about every day, basically. Like maybe like one person, maybe more than one, depending on situation. But sometimes I call and it's kind of like, what's up? Like, what are we doing here? Like,
You called me.
Yeah, you called me. And I don't even know how to say it, but it's like, man, like I just like want to call you, Mom. I want to call you, Dad, because maybe tomorrow I can't.
Yeah.
Or maybe you can't call me, because we never know, right?
Right.
And I just kind of want to close with that thought, because I think that this podcast for a long time we've promoted like entrepreneurship and like a business and like hustle and stuff, but I just want to be clear that like those are the things that really matter, right?
Yeah,
like
100%,
that,
dude.
like in just like a weird way, like with we were talking earlier about war, it's like sometimes forgetting what the war is about. Like life can be like that, right? Like life is like war. Sometimes we forget what it's all about. What matters is coming home to mom and dad, coming home to brother and sister, wife or girlfriend or fiance or whatever. Like that's all it's about. Like and like those other things, not that they're not important, but like don't get lost in that, right? Like, and that's kind of what I hear from your story, and so I just kind of wanted to close with that. But
dude, I completely agree. Yeah, it's I mean, the little things are the big things, and you really gotta. When people look back on like their deathbed, like I just heard the statistic, and it was something like the things they regret are like being too hard on themselves. That's one of them. Not accepting other like people, like their kids or their wife or whatever, their partner, not accepting them and kind of letting them just like do what they want to do. And it's always a regret of I didn't regret that I did this. It's that I regret that I didn't do this, that I didn't start that business, that I didn't start that podcast, that I didn't move to Europe, that I didn't join the military, that I didn't, it's the regrets. People always regret the things that they didn't do, so like go out, just try to do your dreams and don't be so hard on yourself, and, value the people that are there next to you, because the little things are the big things.
Love it, man. Well, I really could do another hour at least of this, but I will say, like, just to give you a chance to close, like, tell people again, like, your website, not just for WindanSea and that information, but also how, like, people can get in touch with about some of the philanthropy you do with veterans, and some of the work you do with veterans, with the surf therapy, with the plant medicine, the holistic healing. Like, how can people get in touch with you and access those resources?
Yeah, thank you. So the website is WindanSeaCoffee.com, spelled like the beach. So there's no D in and. It's like WindanSea. Just like on La Jolla. So WindanSeaCoffee.com. On Instagram, it's at WindanSea Coffee. Check out my YouTube channel. And regarding the philanthropy stuff, so yeah, we donate to One More Wave, which is a surf therapy nonprofit based out of San Diego. And another thing that we also do a number of different like veteran stuff. Like we help other organizations as well, but that's the big one. And then another initiative that we just started, it's added on our website now, which is it's kind of cool. It's called Eco Drive, and the organization is called 4Ocean. So if you purchase anything on our website, it adds to your cart kind of automatically. You can toggle it off if you don't want to, so it's no big deal. But it's like a $2 donation, and what that does is it cleans a pound of plastic out of the ocean. So and a pound of plastic, for reference, it's something like 100 forks, like 1,000 straws, 20 water bottles, something like that. So it's tangible. Yeah. It's like a meaningful thing, and especially when we are finding microplastics in our balls. I think it's about time we start doing something about it. So and please just connect with me on anything. Shoot me a DM. I'm very approachable. If you if you have any questions, if you're interested in the product, if you want to try a sample, or if you're a business that's looking to collaborate, we do a lot of stuff with like fitness organizations organizations, if you're another podcast, if you're a coffee shop owner, a grocery store, a food distributor, anybody, just hit me up. Yeah, I'd love to connect. So
Yeah, and if you don't hit them up, and if you don't go on the website, you'll end up with microplastics in your balls.
Yeah. Double the plastic.
Jordan, loved having you on today. This has been a real honor, man.
Yeah, you too, Steve. I appreciate
love
it, brother.
Shit, man. Awesome.
Thank you, bro.
All right, awesome. Thanks, guys. That's a wrap. This has been another recorded episode of Stay Classy Podcast with your host, Steve Wire. Thanks so much for tuning in, and as always, you can find all of our content at our website at stayclassypod.com. And thanks to our production sponsor and partner, MaxLux Media. You can find them at maxluxmedia.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Every subscription helps and goes a long way towards ensuring that we can continue to produce content for viewers like yourself. Thanks so much. Stay classy.